Now, as we come to the end of October, coming up soon, we're going to be finishing off this series. So you got a couple more weeks of this series that's been What is Stopping You? And throughout this series, we're looking at, ultimately, I think it's 11 that have been written out, objections that we can develop towards the Christian faith and why we wouldn't want to put our faith in it or put our faith in Jesus. Ultimately, what's stopping us from fully committing. Now, if there's one issue that becomes a little more a hot topic, it's going to be the issue that stops people, and I'm calling this one, I'm going to broaden it a little bit as we go. I'm calling it church leader abuse. Now, I think one of the objections that people offer to the Christian faith is that Christians are hypocrites. So why would I want to be one? Now, that one's truthfully easy to get around. We're just like, well, Christians are fallen people too. We learn, we grow. But if there's one that's a little bit more than that, it's church leaders. And the abuse of church leaders, I'm not just talking about what you've seen in the news most of the time and the cover-ups of sexual abuse. Those are terrible things that should be dealt with. And truthfully, we do have criminal codes even to deal with that. And it's a shame that the church would rather protect its name rather than the name of Christ. But this type of leader abuse is something that's a little bit more. It's not illegal in legality sense, but it is something more. Church leader abuse is broader than just physical abuse, which should never be either. But it can be found in areas such as where you talk about authoritarianism, where you'll often hear it described this way when the leaders start to do something and they defend it with, well, the scripture says, touch not the Lord's anointed. You can't question me. This is what I'm saying is going to go, and that's it. You don't like it? Well, then you can get out. Or there's the financial abuse. This one's usually depicted a little different. It's usually more connected with what we would consider the health and wealth gospel, where I tell you, you need to give more, you need to continue to tithe, or you're not going to get God's blessing. In fact, I have heard pastors, unfortunately, would say something like this: the reason your car keeps breaking down is because you're not tithing. The reason you are unhealthy is because you're not giving enough. Even to the point they'll say, I heard this one said, that the reason your kid can't stay out of the emergency room is because you're stealing tithes. All the while the people are struggling, trying to get ahead, trying to buy this blessing, and what's the leader living like? As if they're kings. And what happens is the people, they look at this and they look at these leaders, and there's more examples, you can think of more. And they look at them and say, well, if that's supposed to be the leaders of this faith, what reflection does that have on the God whom they say to serve? And they walk away. And it's more widespread than you think. I've shared before, but it's a potent example. I wasn't there for this one. Back where we were before, we had mechanics that we knew quite well. In my wife's country, they called them bush mechanics. We just called them like the backyard mechanics. But they had an actual shop. It was a real shop. And she was in there talking with him quite a bit because we developed a good relationship with them. They were Christian people. And a person came in, dropped their car off, and somehow this guy went off on a tangent on how all pastors are crooked. On how they're all just greedy. How they're all in it for money. And he just went on and on and on. And eventually his car was finished. He just left. And the mechanic looked at my wife and goes, what do you suppose he would have said if he found out your husband was a pastor? But that just shows the typical mindset. Take a look at how pastors are often depicted in media, in movies, in shows. I think in all the years of shows, I think that probably one of the best ones that you can actually find would be in the show Seventh Heaven, where it shows more of his family life and some of the issues that he struggles with. But for the majority, what do you get? They're thinking, what's a pastor like? Well, they're more like Reverend Lovejoy from The Simpsons. He doesn't really care. He's just doing the job. He doesn't care. Whatever. But they look at that, and that's kind of the abuse. In fact, the Barna Research Group back in 2023 did a survey that 68% of the people who deconstruct their faith, they do so because of bad experiences with churches or church leaders. That's a big number. And so it's a serious issue. And if you don't think so, I want to take for a moment something you probably put in your mind. Think about where this church was 30 years ago. Think about the fact that the amount of people who were coming, it was big, packed. And then within this span of, truthfully, I hate to say it, but this is the historical reality, the span of one leader in 7 years, it went from 150 down to about 60. And I'll tell you, this church is not the only example I know that of. I know of others where a pastor went in, and within 2 years, the church went from 300 down to 70. And not for the right reasons, but because generally authoritarian leader spiritual abuse. And so we're going to deal with that this morning. That's our objection we're going to look at. You go, where is he going to go in the scriptures for this one? We're going to go to Matthew chapter 20. Matthew chapter 20. This is an interesting event. I'm going to use it as the basis, and then it's going to look like I'm ignoring it for a bit, but I'm going to come back to it. But Matthew chapter 20, starting at verse 20. And we're going to go down to the 28th verse. Now this is an event that is kind of unique. Most people, we focus on the end teaching of what Jesus said, which we're going to get there, but it's what's set up to it. Matthew chapter 20, starting at verse 20. Says, Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to him, and with her sons, kneeling down and asking something from him. And he said to her, What do you wish? She said to him, Grant that these 2 sons of mine may sit, one on your right hand and the other on your left in your kingdom. But Jesus answered and said, You do not know what you ask. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? They said to him, We are able. Sorry, I got behind on there. We are able. So he said to them, You will indeed drink my cup and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with. But to sit on my right hand and on my left is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father. And when the 10 heard it, they were greatly displeased with the 2 brothers. But Jesus called them to himself and said, You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you. But whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. And whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. All right, we'll stop there in our reading. Sorry, I forgot to change the slide. This is a unique event. It's interesting because if you read the parallel accounts, Matthew is trying to soften it a bit. And what do I mean by that? Because the parallel accounts in Mark, it doesn't have anything about their mother coming. It's the 2 disciples. Now, does that mean that their mother didn't come? No. It just means Matthew's trying to soften it just a little bit and say, hey, the mother wants this for her 2 sons. Isn't it interesting that it also doesn't say the names of the sons here? But if you're familiar with the disciples, you know which 2 this is. And that makes it a little more interesting. It's James and John. They're the sons of Zebedee. What are they really asking for? More power, more authority. They want a better spot. They want to be the leaders. And it's caused a rift a little bit. And how do I know that? Because what does it say? Well, the 10 are now indignant. They knew what this meant. Right and left. They want the position of power next to Jesus. This is not a good look on these two. Why do you think Matthew's trying to soften it? It wasn't them. It was their mother really wanted it. They're kind of going along. No. Notice that even there, Matthew doesn't hide it. Jesus asks the question not to the mother. He asks it to them. They're like, yeah, we're able. So what's the point there? The point is, there is something intrinsic in us that can cause us to go astray. Now keep that in mind. We're going to return to it. But before we do, I'm going to answer this objection. That we say, well, I'm leaving the faith, I'm leaving the church because of spiritual abuse. If the leaders are that bad, then why would I want to follow Jesus? My question is going to cut through it right now before I deal with the emotional aspect of it, because that's where we really develop, is this. Who are you really following? Are you following the leader of the church? Are you following the pastor, the celebrity, the teacher of the church? Because if you are, I guarantee you that eventually you'll become disappointed every single time. And I'm saying that as the person in that position. Why? Because I'm not perfect. I cause problems. I have my own ways of doing things. I've got my own emotions. I've got my own temptations. I've got my own struggles. And trust me, one of the first things I also learn as the leader of a congregation is I'm never going to make everybody happy. It's going to happen. But there's also times I make mistakes. And it can be as simple as somebody thinks I slighted them, even when I didn't mean to. I had an occasion one time as I was very distracted, and I drove up to the church to get something. Somebody was there in the parking lot. They said hi. I said hi to them, and I continued on to what I was doing. Funny event, I had their father show up at the house about 2 days later, talking about how their daughter was upset with me. Now keep in mind, when we're not talking teenagers, we're talking 20, 30 years old. The father's like 60. And I said, why? And they told me that she had actually wanted to stop and talk with me. Now, and I missed it. Did I do it on purpose? No. Did she actually give me any indication she wanted to talk outside of just being pleasant? From my perspective, no. But it is something that I made somebody upset. Why? Because unfortunately, I can't read minds, I can't read hearts. Jesus can, I can't. There's a difference. So I did. The only thing I could do after that was I apologized to her. I went and found her and apologized. In fact, I actually went a step further than that, because she was in church on Sunday. I publicly apologized to her. But if we're looking to follow people, we're going to be disappointed every single time. You think of some of the leaders that have fallen in the last while that people really celebrated. Some that you probably even forgot about. How about someone like Ravi Zacharias? He did great things in the areas of philosophy and debating and understanding. But what did we find out? That he had committed what we classify as spiritual leader abuse and took advantage of a young lady. That's why you don't hear much about him anymore. There's many other examples. And it's not a new thing. Look at what was happening. This is why I put the scripture up there. In the church of Corinth, 1 Corinthians 1, 12 to 13. they were having a problem with syncretism in the church. He says, now I say this, that each of you says, I am of Paul, or I am of Apollos, or I am of Cephas, or I am of Christ. What was going on in this church? Like, oh, Paul was the one who led me to Jesus. Like, yeah, well, I'm even better. Apollos, he was the strong leader. I followed him. Yeah, but we're from Peter. Peter, we heard him on the day of Pentecost. We were in Jerusalem at the time. We came under him. And then you probably got someone going, no, guess what, though? I was in the crowd one day when Jesus was teaching. What are they really following? This is what Paul's coming out and he's like, look, you're like, wait a minute. Was I crucified for you? Were you baptized into my name? See, there's the problem. We've built up, unfortunately, a lot of times the church is not built really around Christ anymore. It's built around a celebrity pastor. It's built around the one who can be the most charismatic. I ran across a Facebook reel yesterday and I decided to put it to the test. In the video, the guy said he went into ChatGPT and asked, how can I grow a large, popular church quickly? That's what he asked. And then he went through his criteria. So I decided to ask the exact same question. And do you know what one of the criteria were? Have a very charismatic leader. Charismatic. Make sure they're a tremendous speaker. And then people can flock to it. And of all the things that were there, just so you know, not one of the 10 things it listed on his list or mine said anything about scriptural truth. It was all about performance-based. Make people feel when you do sermons, make sure they're emotionally relatable. Make sure it's a concert-like atmosphere so people can feel it. Make sure you connect them. Make them, when visitors come, make sure they feel like VIPs. Nothing had it about them follow Christ. And the biggest problem that we can have is people get disillusioned because they're following people, not Jesus. And that's the question we have to ask. There's nothing wrong with having physical teachers, but we're truthfully disciples of Jesus Christ. And it's not Christ who has caused the problem, it's sinful, wicked people. And now here's the thing that the scriptures tell us. There are false leaders. One of the saddest things is we're told you're never allowed to judge anything. Don't you dare judge. You can't tell me that's a false leader or not. Why? Because I like them. Sometimes false teachers say things that are right. That's not the problem. The problem is when they mix the falsehood in. Look what Paul writes. Again, Church of Corinth, second letter. He says, for such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into apostles of Christ. Then he goes even further. He says, and no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers also transform themselves into ministers of righteousness, whose end will be according to their works. Just so you know, he's not talking about demons here. Paul's not talking about Satan and his followers, demons. He's talking about people who are going out claiming that they're apostles, claiming that they're sent ones, claiming that they're teachers of the truth. And what does Paul call them? If you really look at this, it's not flattering. He calls them ministers of Satan. That was in his day. It's far worse even now. Why is it worse now? Well, it's simple, because we have multimedia. It's easy to get out there. You get people wrapped up in everything. Why do they teach? You got some people who teach from just selfish motives to say, look how popular I am. There are others who simply desire to gain fame and fortune. You take a look at some of the most wicked ministers out there, and they've got huge followings. And they're found all over. They're found in Africa. They're found in Brazil. They're found in the United States. They're found in Canada. They're found in England. Wherever you go, they are found. And people look at them and they say they're Christian leaders when they're not. See, the problem is we want to broaden the definition of who is a Christian, and particularly who's a Christian leader, so broad that anybody who can claim it, who claims it, is it. And then when we say no, they're not, we try to apply the idea of what's called the no true Scotsman fallacy. If you're not familiar with that logical fallacy, it goes something like this. What's called no true Scotsman. The original fallacy is along the lines of, no true Scotsman likes oatmeal. Wait a minute. My father was born in Scotland and he doesn't like oatmeal. So what's the logical conclusion? He must not be a Scotsman. In other words, you can't just say they're not just because they don't fit your definition. In that case, what's the definition of a Scotsman? One who's born in Scotland. That's how it works. The problem is we made our definition of Christian too broad. That's not the biblical definition of Christian. The Christian is a follower of Christ. And then how do we define that? Well, this is where, unfortunately, it's important to know. You've got to know what the church creeds are. What's called orthodoxy. I believe in God the Father, maker of heaven and earth. I believe in Jesus Christ, his only begotten Son, God from God. I believe in the Holy Spirit, who is also God, who comes and dwells with believers. There's doctrines. And then you break down the doctrine of Jesus. Born of a virgin. Lived like we did, was without sin, crucified on our behalf, rose on the third day, ascended to the Father. He's returning to judge the quick and the dead. He will set up his kingdom. These are all what's considered orthodoxy. Anything that's outside of that is called heresy. And those who practice heresy are not Christian. And you've got plenty of people who are very charismatic, who can draw you right in. They're not ministers of Christ. They're ministers of Satan. And we just don't like that. In fact, it's fascinating. This is why I tell you to be careful of every message that's out there. The Chosen series, it's got a kind of a peculiar scene. And it's in a scene that you have Jesus practically rebuking John the Baptist for calling the people brood of vipers. No, did John call them brood of vipers? Yep, he did. He said, "You brood of vipers, who warned you to flee the coming wrath?" And the Chosen Ministers has Jesus kind of reprimanding him for that. There's only one problem that they're skipping. Jesus also did that. He called them brood of vipers. Why? Because it's trying to remold Jesus into a different image. Does it do a lot of things right? And the answer is yes. But there's things that are wrong that you've got to watch. And it's amazing of how many teachers that I watch and I listen to, when they preach and their most inspiring messages, they almost never touch the Scriptures. And then you wonder why it doesn't work. So understand, there are teachers who are in it just for themselves. Do they look righteous? Sure they do. Why? And that's no surprise. Because Satan does the same disguise. And so a lot of times when we classify as spiritual abuse, we're like, well, because of their abuse, that I'm going to deny Christ. And they may not even be Christian at all. They may not be followers of Christ in any way, shape, or form, except for when they're performing. But that's not all. Believe it or not, there are selfish leaders. There are people in charge of churches who are selfish. Look what it says, Paul's letter to Church at Philippi. For many walk, of whom I have told you often, and now tell you even weeping. For many walk, of whom I have told you often, and now tell you even weeping, that they are enemies of the cross of Christ, whose end is destruction, whose God is their belly, and whose glory is in their shame, who set their mind on earthly things. These are ones who claim to be Christians. Yet what are they really serving? Their own appetites. That can be greed. That can be lust. That can be power. That can be whatever. They have the wrong motivation. And notice he flat out says, their God is not Christ. They're gods themselves. This is why you can have people who are greedy, who expect everything from their congregations. I remember watching a video of a pastor get up in front of his congregation and was complaining that they hadn't honored him enough lately. Why? Because they haven't given him a new Rolex recently. He's still driving. I wish I was joking. This is really what it was. They haven't given him a new car lately. First of all, never buy me a Rolex. I'm going to go even a step further. Don't even buy me a watch. Because I never wear them. My wife has tried. I just don't like the feel of them on my wrist. It's just the way it is. I find ways to do the sun, or to do the time. I used to be very good at telling where the time was by the sun when I was in camping. Just because you'd live it long enough. Now, everyone's got phones. And if I don't have one, I can just walk by someone and go, okay, there's the time. But that's what he's saying. You need to honor me more. Who's he serving? Himself. You understand that there are selfish leaders. They are not representatives of Jesus. It's fascinating to look at because one of the things that we've done in the church is we've loosened the restrictions of the qualifications of the overseer and elder and teachers. We kind of just open it up to anybody who seems good enough at talking or speaking. Somebody who just wants to. This is why you get people who are disillusioned with their local church and they just go next door and start another one. And they build a following. That's what they do. Now, I'm not saying that's always bad. Sometimes that's necessary. Because the church has gotten so far off track and it's so entrenched that the only thing you can do is, in essence, start over. But a lot of times it's not. It's worse than that. That's kind of thing. Obviously, there are some who start off selfish. There are. I watched a documentary on Robert Tilton. If you're not familiar with him, that's okay. But when they did the documentary, they talked to his college roommate. And they said him and Robert Tilton used to sit up and talk about how they could get money, how they could get rich. And the one thing that they discussed on how they could really do it was start a church. And that's what he did. So in that case, he did start off. Why? Because his God was his belly. And when you're caught under one of these leaders, I guarantee you it's going to feel painful. It's going to hurt, and you're going to experience leader spiritual abuse. That's what you're going to feel. Now let's deal with the question. And I'm going to return back to our text. No leader is perfect. Notice, James and John, they come with their mother, ask the question, hey, can we sit at your right and left? The other 10, they hear this and they get greatly displeased. Now, depending on your words here, they become very angry, they become indignant with, what was happening here? I admit, I'm doing a little speculation because We don't have human psyche here. What is happening? I think there's a good reason why James and John have kind of done this. Think about it. Peter, James, and John are the three core. They were in there when Jesus raised Jairus' daughter. They were the only ones with him on the Mount of Transfiguration. You also got the fact that of the three, Peter seems to be the most vocal. Peter's the one who's like, "You're the Christ, the Son of the living God." Peter's the one who spoke up on the Mount of Transfiguration. Peter's the one who got out of the boat. They may be looking at this and say, "Hey, wait a minute. We want some of that too." And they try to get ahead. So yes, the answer is, do I think there are leaders who've gotten off track? Absolutely. I think there are genuine leaders who seek to serve Christ. That's their goal. But because of the enemy knows us inside and out. He knows what draws them. He knows what pushes them. For some, he will pull them off into money. For others, he'll pull them off into sexual temptation. For others, he will push them off into anxiety and depression and worry. And that will reflect in their leadership. Peter and James here, what did it seem that they wanted? They wanted honor, maybe even power. And I don't think this is beyond the scope of the Scripture. Why? Because what does Jesus turn around and talk about when he finds out that the 10 are indignant and these two have asked for this and it's made the others upset? First thing he goes to is, "You've seen that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them." Why would he talk about such a thing? Because this seems to be what they wanted. There's something to say about having power. Some men are corrupted by authority, where they develop the attitude, "I am always right. I'm the one closest to God. I'm the one who's put in the study. So you listen to me." And then how far can you go? Well, you can fall into, "Touch not the Lord's anointed." Let me give you a real life example of how this can happen. Are you familiar with the denomination called Calvary Chapel? It was started by, I'm going to make sure I get this name right. I think it's Chuck Meisler. Say that again? Maybe. It's Chuck something. But his leadership style in the church is what I want to get to. It was called the Moses-style leadership. Now, there are different types of governmental oversights in churches. If you're not familiar how churches often work. Our church is called congregational government, which means we have a check and balance in the church that keeps the leaders in line. Supposed to. It can become corrupted, yes. So the check and balance is this. A pastor cannot just throw anybody out and take over everything. What can happen is the church can vote. I believe ours is 80%. It might be 75. I'd have to double check that. It's one of those two numbers. If they get a 75 or 80% majority vote, they can remove the pastor. They can also vote in a pastor. The same is true for the leadership of deacons. Now, without that process, what's the check and balance? This is where it gets funny. I have kids ask me, "Who's your boss?" Ultimately, it's God, but it's like, okay, well, who's your human boss? Currently, right now, it's Brother Murray. Then they go, okay, well, who's his boss? I am. It's kind of how it works. Guess what our job is? To keep each other in line. And if either one of us can't do that, then what do? Well, then we go to the rest of the deacon board. And if we still run into it, then what do? Go to the rest of the church. That's what it's designed for. So it's a check and balance. That's our church government. Now there's others. Presbyterian church government. There's the Catholic church government, which is more one guy at top calls it. Well, in the Calvary Chapel, it's called the Moses style. And in this one, it has the potential for abuse because they're saying Moses had the absolute authority over the people of Israel, so the pastor has the absolute authority over the church. Now, when people ask, which one is best? The answer is none of them. You go, wait a minute. Why? Because they're all subject to abuse. There. You go, well, what about that check and balance of 80%? Well, let's put it this way. All I've got to do is bring in enough people in our church long enough for a year that they're members, and I can make sure you never hit 80%. See the problem? In fact, I know churches that have done that. In the Moses model, well, you'd be like, well, if he's bad. But here's the thing. If the leader is godly and the church is godly, then both are going to work. And so you can easily have people who get off track from one way or the other. No leader's perfect. This is why I started with, who are you following? Are you following the leader or are you following Jesus? And you can find plenty of information out there on leaders who have fallen. There's a book called When Great Leaders Fall. And even when I started ministry, one of the books that I was given very early on, at the time it was a regional minister. At the time I believe it was Jerry Horseman. The book that I was given was like how to fail-proof your ministry. And it wasn't how never to fail in a church. It was how steps to take to keep yourself from falling into sin. So understand, and this is, there are godly leaders who've gotten in the position who have made mistakes, who have fallen. They're not perfect. If it can happen so easily, even within the disciples themselves, saying, hey, I want this right and left position, and then cause an infight in between them. I don't think this is the only time the disciples run into this problem. There's a time when they were discussing on the road and they start discussing who's the greatest. What do you think they were basing it on? We're not really told, but I think the text gives enough indication that this is after the 12 have been sent out, And they're coming back, and the first time they come back, they're like praising, like we were able to do miracles, even demons were subject to us. First thing Jesus does is correct them right there. He's like, hey, don't celebrate that the demons are subject to you. Celebrate rather that your name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. I know the wording's not exact, but that's what Jesus says in this instant. So I think on the road, what were they doing? It's like, hey, how many people did you heal? Yeah, well, I did more. Yeah, you might have done more healing, but I had more people here put faith in Jesus than you did. He's like, no, yeah, but in my town, most of them were already believers, but I was able to raise 3 dead people. It's like, yeah, but I was able to cast out 10 demons. Like, so which one of us is the greatest? How do I know they're embarrassed by this conversation? Because it says when Jesus got to the house, he turns and goes, what were you talking about on the road? And they clam up. Like, I'm not telling him. Jesus already knows. How do I? Because what he does, he calls a child. It's like, come here. He's like, and he looks at the subject, like, you want to be the greatest in my kingdom? You gotta have the faith like this child. The child just came to Jesus when he asked. That was it. That's the disciples who are walking, seeing, experiencing the very ministry of Jesus. And they were struggled from time to time. What do you think your leaders are going to be? Why do you think you're urged as a church, pray for your leaders? Because you never know what's coming. But in the end, we need, that's not even the right slide, there we go, to understand the leaders that Jesus chooses. Notice the criteria that Jesus did. I've been hitting on this, I just want to drive it home. Matthew 20, 26, 27. He says, for them, you know that the Lord of the Gentiles, they lord it over them. They exercise authority, they're authoritarian, not with you. Yet it shall not be among you. But whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. If you desire to be first, become the slave. What did Jesus just do to their ambitions? He flipped it. I'm thinking, how can I become great? Because if that's your desire, you want the greatness. Don't worry about building the mega church. Don't worry about getting your names on the books and the study lessons. You want to become the greatest? Go wash feet. You want to become the greatest? Go sit with the sick. You want to be the greatest? Go sit with the family going through the tragedy. You want to be the greatest? Put the others ahead of yourself. What does that do to all those instances of spiritual abuse? Spiritual abuse says, I'm the boss. Jesus says, no, you're the servant. The abuse says, give your money to me. Jesus says, no, you take care of them. It says, you live to serve me in the church. No. The leader lives to serve the people of the church. And then Jesus drives it home even further. He's not just saying, if you go to the next verse, he's not just saying, hey, you got to do this. He goes, just so you know. He says, the Son of Man came, and he came to serve, not to be served. They knew what he meant. They knew exactly what he meant. He's like, I came to serve. And I came even to the point, it's like, how far? I'm going to give my life as a sacrifice for many. So if we've been struggling with this in the past, and we look at the past and we're like, hurt church leaders, and it happens. I'll tell you this of a gentleman I met through golfing, actually, back when I golfed all the time. His name was Wayne. And I met him. My chair, my deacon knew him. And we went golfing. He said, hey, I'm going to take Wayne with us. And he introduced me to Wayne. And I got talking with Wayne. Built a good relationship. There's plenty of times that Wayne and I just went golfing. And he told me, I haven't been in a church in 40 years. I said, okay. I said, why? If you don't mind me asking. He said, because there was a day he wanted to go to church, and he went to church, and he put on the best clothes that he had. You got to remember, this was a long time ago. You're talking 50 years ago now. And he said, I went, and he said, the leader of that church, they came to him and said, if that's the best clothes that you've got, don't bother coming. And he didn't. 40 years he stayed out of a church because of the comment of somebody, of the leader. I'll tell you this much, I really don't care what you wear to church. I do ask you to do your best to be respectable. I do encourage you that if you've got a relationship with Christ, that you'd want to honor him in that way. But the clothes you wear are less consequential as to the heart you have. Because Jesus came to serve. And ultimately, we don't follow men. We follow Jesus. I was trying to decide which verse to use to drive this point home. The disciples were already following Jesus. But it's interesting that even in Paul's letter, where they keep talking about, I'm going to follow Paul, you know what Paul's answer is? Follow me as I follow Christ. In other words, don't follow me when I mess up. If I go off the cliff, be smart enough to stop. If I fall, I don't want you all following with me. Follow me only as I follow Christ. And look what Jesus says. If you desire to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow who? Jesus. There's no denying that church leaders can cause quite a bit of pain. There's no doubt that church leaders can be guilty of abuse in one way or another. Physical, emotional, spiritual, financial. It can happen. But that's not Jesus. Jesus doesn't do such a things. And ultimately, you do not judge one thing by what people have done with it. Just because there are many who've taken the name of Christ and done horrible things in the name of it, doesn't mean Jesus approves. We follow Jesus. It is Jesus who died for you. It is Jesus who created you. It is Jesus who loves you. It is Jesus who calls you to himself. It is Jesus who offers salvation. Follow him. Don't follow me. Don't follow anyone else. We follow Jesus and Jesus alone. Let's pray. Father, I thank you that you have called us to yourself. And Father, I do thank you that there are godly leaders that you have risen up who have a heart that follows you, that yearns for you. And Father, I pray for these leaders. I pray that you will continue to guide them. I pray that you will continue to protect them. And Father, I pray that you will rise up people around them who will desire to uplift them and pray for them as well. But Father, I pray for those most deeply who have been hurt by the abuse of spiritual leaders or even the actions of a church. Well, Father, I pray that you will soften their heart to seek you. That, Father, that you would rise up somebody around them who will introduce them truly to you. And that, Father, that they would know what it means to follow you and no one else. So, Father, I thank you that you have called us by your name, that you've called us to follow you. And may we do so with all that we can. I praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.